Behind me there's a tiny Christmas tree and some tinsel, as well as the rounder, which means I'm recording this at Christmas time at the end of 2020, and we're here to talk about the World Cup of tube lines on a tube map at the end of 2020, the last 4 years, and we're going to analyse all the data and once and for all come up with the ultimate ranking of what is your favourite tube line. So here's how it works. For the last 4 years, I first did it in 2017 on Twitter. Follow me at Jeff Tech. I've run the World Cup of Tube Lines, or to give it its proper name, the World Cup of Lines on the TfL map, because there are 11 tube lines, but then if you add on like the DLR, all the other modes, and the cable car and the TfL, there's 16 modes in all. Thameslink featured this year, we'll get to that in a second. I first ran it in 2017, and what it is, if you're not a Twitter user, there's an option on Twitter where you can just run a poll up to 4 options, and in 2017, just for fun, I didn't think it would become an annual event, I did World Cup of Tube Lines, and that year, I didn't seed any of the lines. I just put 16 into a hat, I pulled them out at random, and the Jubilee beat the Victoria. I beg your pardon, the Victoria beat the Jubilee and won in 2017. People loved it, people got really involved and engaged. They said, would you do it again? So I did. In 2018, I reran World Cup of Tube Lines. Again, it was a Jubilee versus Victoria final. The Jubilee actually won this time, so it's one to the Victoria, one to the Jubilee, and I started to think that's interesting, those two always get to the final. Can we actually separate them? I ran it again in 2019. Once Jubilee got to the third, fourth place playoffs, but interestingly, the Victoria played the DLR in the final and the Victoria won. So the Victoria line are now won twice and the Jubilee once. And then we had this year, the World Cup of Lines on the TfL map in 2020. A slight anomaly because Thameslink was back on the map and I knew it was coming back in October, November when I did this. I introduced that instead of the Waterloo and City line, which is currently closed, and Thameslink actually got all the way through to the final. We'll discuss this in a minute, and won. It was a Thameslink versus DLR final. So the DLR was in the final, and the Jubilee and Victoria were up there again in third and fourth place for the third and fourth place playoff. But this year, more than ever, loads more people voted than ever. Loads of you got engaged on Twitter. It was great, and I realised that I now had 4 years worth of data in a spreadsheet, and I thought, surely I can do something with this. And I opened up Excel and looked at all the data, and then I thought, I'm much better at making videos about transport than I am at crunching Excel data. Fortunately, I know a man who eats Excel spreadsheets for breakfast. I got in touch with him, my friend Matt Parker, Stand Up Maths, and I said, can you have a look at my data? He said, sure, send it over.
Thanks, Jeff. Hello, everyone. It's me, Matt Parker, your friendly neighborhood mathematician, and I've taken Jeff's spreadsheet, I've tidied it up a little, and you can see it here. That's what's on my screen at the moment. I've put in RGB columns. They're new. I took the RGB colors that Jeff had used when formatting the spreadsheet, and I've actually rigged up my Christmas tree, so the LEDs on this tree go the colors in the order they are on the spreadsheet. At the moment, they're just alphabetical by the names of the lines. We can do a lot better. So when I was thinking, what is the ultimate way to rank these? One idea I had was, what if I calculated the average percentage of votes that each line got across all of the rounds it was in? And each line, they're in different numbers of rounds, depending on how successful they are. But I figured, well, they're probably playing a pretty much random selection of the other lines, so it should be reasonably fair if I just calculate their average percentages. And that's what you can see in the extra column here. Now, if we select all of that data, and we're going to sort that range, and oh yes, my data does have a header row. Average percentage, we want to go descending, so the best is at the top, sort, and there we go. So, oh, the tree is updated. So you've got Jubilee, a little bit of grey right at the top. You've then got the Thameslink, which probably black. You know what, I can change the number of rows it reads. Let's just do the top 5. So we'll have Jubilee, Thameslink, DLR, Victoria, Piccadilly, all wildly different colours. As you can, that was a lot of work. That's not paying off. Anyway, that's not a bad way to rank it, and I was pretty happy with that, and Jubilee wins, which kind of makes sense. I did dabble with, you may have seen there was another thing called vote split, and if we sort by vote split, what I was doing there was just having a think. I've done it up the wrong way. Data, sort range. Okay, that's the right way up now. So this is the top 5 according to Vote Split, which is where I just calculated if on average each line got more or less than its share of votes in that round. So if all the votes were evenly distributed, each line would rank 1. And you can see here Piccadilly is ranking 1.23, which puts it at the very top, followed by Thameslink, then Jubilee, Victoria, Bakerloo right at the bottom. And this is a weird one. I don't know if this one's fair, because it kind of depends on how popular the rounds were. And I feel like this one might be swayed by if a line was against another very popular line. But basically, Piccadilly, little surprise winner there, and that's because when Piccadilly lost, it didn't lose by much, and when it won by a lot. So even though it's not normally at the top, there's an argument that Piccadilly was actually the ultimate winner. But the trouble with all these things, I'll go back to average percent, is you can argue it however you want. There's no one definite, mathematically certain way to get the ultimate ranking. You just decide, is some way of combining these different scores fair or not? And that kind of depends on what your definition of fair is. So I think this is probably the best one, in which case Jubilee is the ultimate winner across all of them. I'm prepared to say that. The one thing we can say with no uncertainty is that consistently the cable car is the worst. There you go. You know what? Let's give cable car its time in the sun. I'm going to delete every other row apart from, there it is, the cable car. That took longer to update than I expected. Back to you, Jeff.
Thanks, Matt. What's really interesting about that, I find, he looked at it in 2 different ways, is that I always had a sense that the Piccadilly was popular. It does well in high scoring rounds but doesn't win, so it's very interesting to see that the Piccadilly is popular. It makes me want to sort of seed the Piccadilly against lines which I know it will easily beat if I do this again next year. And we all know I'm going to do this again next year in 2021, right? Because I feel like the Piccadilly deserves to do better. It's always funny, by the way, I never ever stipulate on what basis you should vote for a tube line. So people always come back to me, they go, what, is it the stations? Is it like the architecture? Is it the punctuality? Is it in? And I'm like, you can choose whatever you like to be your thing about why you vote for that line. People then do. The Piccadilly gets a lot of votes because a lot of Charles Holden stations on there. People vote for the Jubilee line because they like the noise of the engines. That is a valid reason for voting for the Jubilee. But I love that people vote for it for all different reasons. So we've got Matt's data there. I'll be using the other one where the Piccadilly doesn't come top when we do our summary in a minute. But I need to mention some people on Twitter. I don't know their real name, but I did get a tweet from someone called Hellgunner on Twitter whilst this was all going on, going, are you going to analyse any of this data? Yes, I am, in this video. And they're also a bit of a football fan because they talked about coefficients and the football UEFA method that they use. All I know is that they sent me this spreadsheet where they'd done some sums and some maths on it, and they'd come up with their own rankings on what they thought would be the ultimate 16 ranking list. I'm going to get to my own rankings in a minute. Whilst we're here, I do want to talk about a twist that happened this year and why we talk about the numbers behind the polls. You only see the percentages, but Twitter, boo, changed about 18 months ago from old Twitter to new Twitter. Took us an age to get our head around new Twitter. But the good thing about new Twitter is that there's an API, an application programming interface behind it. And if you're clever, coder, which I'm not, then you can dig in sort of behind the scenes and into the numbers. And this weird thing happened this year. There was somebody on Twitter called Flyfly, thank you, who first tweeted me and pointed out that you could dig into Twitter and get the actual numbers if you ever needed to see the numbers. Then this amazing thing happened. There's somebody on Twitter, his real name is Kishan. I shall shove up his Twitter name now, and another chap called David. I did not know these people. They just started chatting to me, saying, would you like, maybe some sort of analyst behind this? And I gather that they all got chatting to each other, and one of them did some coding and the other one went, oh, that's good, I like what we did there. And before I knew it, these guys were collaborating, and they basically built up this amazing website which gave real-time information. So you could see, whilst the poll was taking place, like the graph was like updating like I think, hourly. It was amazing the work they did behind it. They improved it based on feedback, and now I gather they're all best friends. So when I'm doing all this analysis, I'm excluding Thameslink. We do need to give a nod to Thameslink because I knew Thameslink was going to be on the map this year, and Thameslink actually won. The reason why, the GTR social media team, who I talk to and I'm friendly with, and I did no more than just say, this is happening, and then they got on it. And I genuinely had no idea. My phone dinged and somebody said, have you seen this? And I was like, what? And basically GTR had started to put up signs on passenger information screens at stations saying, please vote for Thameslink in Jeff's World Cup of Tube Line. There was one, I think TfL got wind of this, maybe somebody at the DLR that knows me or follows my channel, I had a clip of somebody going, World Cup, and it sort of flashed up on the DLR. Vote, not Thameslink, but by then it was too late. So that is what happened in this year's 2020 World Cup. So for my own summing up, what I then basically did was just to look at all 4 years, and I sort of noted that the Victoria has won twice, the Jubilee has won once, but it's got to the third, fourth playoff twice. The DLR has been in the finals twice, but never won. The Northern has been in the third, fourth playoff twice, and so on. Piccadilly quarterfinal twice, and when there were things like, say, like the Circle Bakerloo, WMC TfL, I've only ever got to the quarterfinal once. I just ranked them by who had the best percentages in their losing match. So, in summary, we've got what Matt did, thank you Matt, with his spreadsheet. We've got what Hello Gunner did with his UEFA-based football coefficient spreadsheet, and then we've got my rankings. Those 3 rankings are on screen now. Now what I've done, they're slightly different. You can see they're almost the same. I was hoping they might all be perfect, but to make them perfect, I've simply put 1 to 16 against all of those, added them up and divided them by 3 for their average rankings. And you can see, and I'm looking at it on my screen now, that the Victoria and Jubilee are tied. So they are tied for first place with an average ranking of 1.6, and then there's no other tied scores all the way down. But that is it. So that is the ultimate ranking of what your favourite tube line is. So your favourite tube line is the Victoria and Jubilee in joint first, DLR third, Northern fourth, Overground fifth, Piccadilly sixth, District seventh, Metropolitan eighth, Central ninth, Bakerloo 10th, Circle 11th, WMC 12th, then TfL, and then Trams, HSC, and yes, the cable car is your least favourite line / mode on the tube map. That is it. That is the results, the analysis of 4 years of World Cups. Thank you to everybody. Matt Parker, are you still there?
Oh, hey, yes, no, still here. Jeff, absolute pleasure to be part of your video. Thanks for getting me involved. And if anyone wants to see how I wired and programmed and indeed calculated this tree, it's the most recent video on my Stand Up Maths channel.
Thanks, Matt. Do go and subscribe to his channel. Links below in the description. Stand Up Maths. If you're a nerd, you like numbers and crunching maths things. Tasty breakfast. Then please go and follow his channel. Do you eat them dry or with milk? I'm going to go and get on the phone to my Christmas tree supplier and see where I can get some tube-coloured lights from. That's it. Thanks.